Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, episode 91. And today we're going to be talking about 2024 and what's in store. Looking forward to kind of just conversating about where we see the space going, where we see Web3 going, where we see the blockchain evolving to, and importantly, where we see the Metaverse evolving to. So today we're really just looking at expectations, a lot of the narrative around, Bitcoin ETF, around Solana, seeming to continue, moving up around the Bitcoin NFT marketplace. And yeah, it's going to be one of those rare monologue episodes, really just kind of taking a look at a snapshot of where we're at right now, both as a podcast, but also just as the kind of bigger Web3 community. So I want to welcome everyone who's joining us. I'm David Krome, your host, go by Krome in the Metaverse. And like I said, today on Web3 Warriors, we're really just going to be looking at a few key topics in the space. The NFT market, how is the NFT market doing? What are these Bitcoin NFTs and Solana NFTs that are continuing to become more and more popular? We'll also look at the state of the Metaverse and really how are we going to find a way to make the Metaverse more exciting? How are we going to make the Metaverse a destination that people just go to out of habit because it's fun, because they can connect with community there and they can build there and really make a stamp on the space and find a place where communities can kind of come together and collaborate and connect in the digital world, no matter where they are around the world, right? And lastly, I want to take a brief look at the topic of tokenization, which I think is becoming much more popular as it becomes kind of the mainstream narrative, right? We will look at an interview with Blackrock CEO Larry Fink, just to get a bit of the industry perspective on, I think, Bitcoin, the latest Bitcoin ETF being approved. There was a lot of hype around that. The markets haven't exploded as some people expected the Bitcoin market to do, but there is definitely a lot of anticipation surrounding kind of industry entry into Bitcoin and even the wider blockchain conversation. We see that the Ethereum ETF, for example, is pending approval. And, shout out to Margaret Rosenfeld, who was on our episode earlier, or on our show earlier. And she asked the question, do you think they're going to stop at Bitcoin ETFs, or are they going to find other ways to kind of speculate on this cryptocurrency industry that is not going away anytime soon, right? So those are kind of the three topics we're going to be looking at: the NFT marketplace, the state of the Metaverse and what we're looking to do in the Metaverse, and tokenization. And we'll end it off with a bit of an interview with the Blackrock CEO, and then I'll share my thoughts on that, and we'll call it a day, call it an episode. So we've seen that, the market for NFTs and 3D assets is definitely a little bit slower than it was in 2021 and 2022, right? So we haven't quite, recaptured the real hype and maybe speculation that was around the industry at that time. But we also see that the demand continues to grow. And we also see places like Solana and Bitcoin kind of evolving and growing at a fairly steady pace, right? So I think Ethereum is still kind of leading the pack. And personally, I see that Ethereum actually has what I think is the most kind of reliable, decentralized, truly programmable network, and I think that on the question of decentralization is where there are some criticisms of Solana. Now, on the flip side, you can look at Bitcoin and the inscriptions that are becoming more and more popular. So if you haven't heard of either of these options, I'll give a couple marketplaces where you can go and see kind of what's on the blockchain. So for Solana, one of the marketplaces that I really love is exchange.art. So this is basically an art marketplace for NFTs on Solana, and they've got really beautiful work. They've got a thriving community, and they have a lot of, just great artists there, and it's worth checking out. A lot of really cool photography I've seen, which tends to be a little bit more buried in the Ethereum marketplaces that I've seen, but needless to say, it's an option, right? So the downside of Solana, and shout out to Grayson, I see you shouting out Solana in the chat. The downside to Solana that some of the critics say is that historically, it has actually gone down about 9 or 10 times in the past. Now, whereas Bitcoin and Ethereum can both brag that they have never gone down, and that they've only grown and grown. They've had forks where they have to split the Bitcoin or split the network for whatever reason. There's Ethereum Classic, there's the other Bitcoin option or Bitcoin Classic, but basically the real kind of innovation and immutability that comes with NFTs kind of relies on a decentralized network that is going to last hypothetically forever, right? So Bitcoin is sufficiently decentralized with so many nodes that even if certain governments are trying to shut it down, it's just so decentralized at this point that almost nothing could really completely shut down the network, right? Similarly with Ethereum, although they've, kind of moved to a proof of stake system where some say that, it has become a lot more centralized in the way that it's functioning, it is still quite decentralized and has quite a bit of nodes all over the world functioning in a decentralized way. It's never crashed, it's never gone down. And so those two networks are kind of, if you're looking for the most decentralized, reliable, quote unquote, immutable tokens in the space, those are kind of the two main networks that you can go to. But what we've also seen, so we're seeing Solana, we're seeing these Bitcoin inscriptions, which we'll talk about as well. But what we're also seeing is a lot of layer 2 chains that are embracing the NFT space and embracing NFTs as a way to kind of get more adoption of their layer 2 solutions. So layer 2s, which we've discussed in many episodes prior, are really, blockchains that are built in most cases on top of Ethereum, but there are, a layer 2 for Solana, for example, and others. But a layer 2 for Ethereum is usually solving for the gas fee issue, right? So Ethereum's mainnet has fairly high transaction fees when you're sending things, buying things, whatever the case might be, minting a new NFT, So you've got layer 2s like Base by Coinbase, you've got Arbitrum, you got Telos, you got Optimism. There's quite a few out there that have offered this kind of layer 2 solution. And so you can buy NFTs on Base, on Arbitrum, on Telos, and these are using EVM solutions basically, right? But they don't have the high cost. But on the flip side, some of the critics might say that these layer 2s ultimately are much more at risk of essentially folding. If the organization or group that's kind of leading the charge and building these layer 2s decides that they're losing too much money, they can just shut it down. It's not quite as reliable and decentralized as, again, Ethereum would be. So that's kind of the criticism there. But we're also seeing a lot of growth in these spaces. So I don't think there's any bad way to do building on the blockchain, right? And I think that the genuine communities in Arbitrum, in Telos, in Base, and shout out to Coinbase because they've obviously got huge amounts of money. They've been able to really kind of push their layer 2 solution, and there are a lot of amazing artists that have embraced Base and have been selling NFTs on Base. So I think that there's no wrong way to go about it, so there's a lot of really great innovation to see what's going on. Grayson says the great way to grow quickly and innovate is by breaking things and testing things. So I have heard that narrative from some of the pro Solana people out there, and ultimately it does have a thriving community, there's no doubt. So I wanted to highlight the Solana options. I also want to give a quick shout out, and Grayson's actually the one who showed me this site, but drip.house, and that's drip.haus. You may need an invite for this, so if you have any Solana friends, I might have one extra invite, we'll see. But this is a really great platform to check out for NFT collectors. They basically airdrop you free NFTs on like a weekly basis. Really cool creators, a very cool range of the type of art, the style of art, shout out to DGen Poet and Pixels. And yeah, there's just a lot of really cool artists dropping amazing art basically for free on there. They've incorporated this new kind of drip system where you gotta buy drips and they charge you like 1 drip per airdrop, but it's basically free. So I recommend checking that out. Again, that's drip.haus if you are interested in the Solana blockchain and a lot of different projects that are going there. It's one way to kind of see popular projects, see different things that are being built out on Solana, and I just definitely recommend it. So all this to say, yes, I think that it is a valid criticism of Solana that it has gone down several times in the past compared to an Ethereum or a Bitcoin. But I also think that the developers and the diehard kind of community that they have in the space is not going away. And I think that I agree to a certain point with what Grayson's saying. You got to kind of break things and try things out to innovate. And they're one of the few ones that are not trying to build right on EVM and are not trying to basically copy and paste Ethereum and do their own version of Ethereum, right? So you got to give them credit for that. And it's quite impressive what they've been able to do so far. You've got Star Atlas on Solana, which is a really cool Web3 game that's building out, has some very impressive tech and gaming kind of ethos behind it. It's got a whole comic book behind it. So there's a lot of really cool projects that are building on Solana, and I don't see it going anywhere. So for everybody who is just ignoring Solana because of the technical difficulties that they've had up till now, I would strongly recommend taking a look at it and taking it seriously, because there is a lot of activity on the blockchain. There's a lot of developers that are not going to walk away from Solana, and I think it's one that is going to be one to watch this year in 2024 as we look to see how the markets react and how things evolve. So on the Bitcoin side, I definitely have some thoughts on Bitcoin. Let me read Grayson's point on Solana before I move on. You have to note that Solana is built more for business, while ETH is made more for the individual. Okay, there you go. So really trying to harness the power of B2B, trying to make those transactions much more quicker, and also being able to handle larger volumes of transactions at a quicker speed. I know that has been a big piece of what Solana's been trying to do. I know they recently partnered with Visa, so Visa clearly sees a lot of value in the speed and capabilities of the Solana network. So they've actually been making quite a few interesting partnerships, and I think that's part of why their coin has been kind of jumping up in the last few months. But we'll see how things shake out in 2024 for sure. So I want to move on to the Bitcoin conversation, because this is one that definitely needs to be mentioned. It was a huge kind of innovation out of 2023. Did it start in 2022? I want to say it was early 2023. We'll have to do a little bit more history on this. Frankly, I need to get a Bitcoin quote unquote BRC20 expert on the show to really give me a breakdown of, the history of these inscriptions on Bitcoin. I know a bit about the history of crypto art on Bitcoin and using cross-chain and using essentially a kind of layer 2 on Bitcoin to allow purchases of art with Bitcoin, but then to settle on this, cross-chain. I know a little bit about that, which shout out to Kane Mayfield and Porkchop, who kind of educated me on that a while ago. But these inscriptions are new. So what they're doing with inscriptions now is actually basically putting a stamp, an inscription, on a specific Satoshi. So they generally can only handle a very small amount of kilobytes, right? So very, very low grade kind of content, not, high quality videos or high quality digital art, which is multiple megabytes. Everything has to be fairly small to fit on, an inscription on a Satoshi. But needless to say, it's inscribed on the blockchain. So these inscriptions literally are etched into the Bitcoin blockchain. And for that reason, one could argue that they are at least as immutable, if not more immutable, than an Ethereum NFT, for example. Now, I see the innovation. I dig it. I just brought up Bitmap, which shout out to Jagar, one of our most popular guests on the Web3 Warriors show. He's got some amazing creative spaces being built for this Bitmap, which is essentially supposed to be a metaverse on the Bitcoin blockchain. I have so many questions about how this is actually going to function, if it's ever going to actually function, but I love the concept of it, and it's definitely been taking off, and these plots of land in Bitmap are selling. As we see here, the floor is 0.00467 Bitcoin. I don't know how much money that is in real world money, but in fiat money, I should say, not real world money. Crypto money is real money. It might even be more real than fiat. That's a whole other debate. So needless to say, there's a lot going on in Bitcoin right now. And so inscriptions are leading to all kinds of interesting innovations. And as you see, all these NFTs here are all different types of inscriptions, or also known as Ordinals, on the blockchain network. And so, there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of activity. As we see, these pizza ninjas have apparently done, 7 Bitcoin in volume just in the last 24 hours. 7.86 Bitcoin worth of pizza ninjas have been sold on the blockchain. So, there's a lot happening. Now, my criticism of it, as much as I say, partake in blockchain creativity and innovation in any way that you want to, it's all good for the space. But personally, I have questions about Bitcoin and its vision of being a global currency. And can it actually achieve the status of global currency if it is going to continue down this path of inscribing and creating much more congestion on the blockchain? And the reason I ask this is because essentially now Bitcoin transactions are A, quite a bit slower, and B, quite a bit more expensive than they ever were before all of these ordinals and inscriptions kind of took off. So I think that there's one of two outcomes that are going to happen. Either everyone in the Bitcoin ecosystem is okay with this and they just accept that network fees are going to be higher into the future, and that the kind of global currency side of the conversation will rely more heavily on the Lightning Network, which I think still has some kinks to work out, or they just jump over to like an XRP or whatever Solana's building. But again, I don't think you're getting that true decentralization that you get with the native Bitcoin network. So, I think about some of these real diehard advocates for Bitcoin, and I wonder what they think about inscriptions and these quote unquote NFTs on the Bitcoin network. So I think either it's going to be okay and accepted and they just move forward with these inscriptions on the network, or there's some kind of fork conversation. And I don't even know how that would happen, if it's possible to even fork it, because ultimately we know the devs are just going to find a way to inscribe on the new forked network, right? So I don't think that would necessarily end well. So we'll see what happens. But I think this is going to be a major question going through 2024. What happens to these Bitcoin inscriptions? Do they become more popular? Do they take off? Do we see Bitmap, for example, becoming a legitimate metaverse space on the Bitcoin blockchain, if that is possible? So I'll be watching Bitcoin. I'm going to be trying to get some good guests on the show who can give us a really much more thorough breakdown of exactly what inscriptions on the Bitcoin blockchain are and why they are so important, why they're innovative, the provenance that they offer. And now we're starting to see inscriptions on Solana. I actually picked up a couple because, hey, why not? We also see inscriptions on Ethereum. So these are just different types of basically like stamps on the blockchain that are not quite as fully programmed or fully programmable as an actual NFT on the Solana blockchain or the Ethereum blockchain, for example. And shout out to the Tezos blockchain as well, who I don't know what else they do, but have an awesome art community. But if you go to object.com and check out their art, and that's objkt.com, no, objkt.com, object.com. That's where you can find all of the Tezos art, and just shout out to their community because they have an awesome art community. I really don't know what else Tezos does. I think they might have some DeFi or something, but if all they did was art, that would be enough, because it's such a cool option to collect art, relatively low price points, but there's also higher value art that is higher and more expensive. So, even that whole narrative of like only selling cheap art on Tezos, it's not really fair. And it's a great community. So shout out to Tezos as well, looking at the NFT market for 2024. I'm sure they're not going anywhere. So we've touched on Solana is going up, seems to be going up. The devs are not going away, despite, technical issues and criticisms from many people in the Bitcoin and Ethereum ecosystems. It's not going anywhere. Bitcoin inscriptions are clearly not going anywhere, despite their negative impacts on the transaction fees on the Bitcoin network. So we'll be able to watch and see what happens there. And like I say, I'm definitely trying to get some good guests who can add a little bit more knowledge to the Bitcoin side of things, because I am very ignorant on that, mainly because I'm still on the fence as to whether I think A, it'll work long term, especially the metaverse conversation, and B, just whether I actually like the idea of making the Bitcoin network much more expensive and much less feasible as a currency. So all this to say, here at Web3 Warriors, we're going to be continuing to collect art from the community, to showcase art from the community, and to kind of take part in the overall art collecting community and conversation in Web3 across all blockchains, including Bitcoin eventually, if we think it's worth it. Honestly, I don't spend Bitcoin. That's what, like, everyone says to hodl Bitcoin, right? But now Inscriptions came along, and apparently a bunch of people are really cool with spending their Bitcoin on highly speculative assets. But hey, power to you. We'll see. Maybe I'll get an Inscription one day. I do have one or two on cross-chain, so I have some, but not Inscriptions, just the old school crypto art bought with Bitcoin. So what we're looking at here is actually one of our NFT galleries for those of you watching on the live stream. So this is a NFT gallery that you can find at web3warriors.io. Again, that's web3warriors.io. And this is our gamer NFT gallery. And shout out to Ingrid Wood in the building. See you in the chat. We've got a little bit of your art here. We got art from a bunch of artists in the community. So definitely check that out. That's the gamer gallery, web3warriors.io. And you can also check out our main headquarters on the blockchain. We aim to have several of these across different metaverse spaces, but this is the first one in Voxels. You can go to voxels.com, that's voxels.com, and just search for Web3 Warriors, and you will find our headquarters, where we also have a lot of NFT art on display. And we're just going to be having events here, showcasing events and integrating with a couple other properties that we're actually working on as well, including IRL events. So that brings me to the next topic of today's episode, which is really the metaverse and where we see things going, and how is the metaverse going to evolve from here, I think it's an important question that a lot of people have given up on, including he who will not be named, the Zuck. He seems to have moved on to the AI conversation after renaming his business and wanting to take over the entire metaverse. But alas, it continues to grow. It continues to evolve from here. So what we're looking at here is actually a space where you can stream our podcast right in the metaverse. So that's pretty cool. When I look at the metaverse conversation, I think that the only way that it's really going to evolve from here, and I don't think the goal should be quote unquote mass adoption, but it should be entertainment and education and fun and excitement. Appreciate you, Ingrid. Like the gallery. It's just the starting, we're building out from here. So what we're looking at doing, and I say we as a group of friends and people from the community, shout out to Storytime DAO, shout out to the whole NFT community from the clubhouse, because we've been working at something. Basically a collective of artists and creators who just love the tech and see the direction of where this is going, see the direction of where the metaverse is going, and the idea of it just being an extension of our reality where we can go meet with people in there, collaborate in there, and bring value to people and to each other, really, in this world. So we've kind of seen that meeting up in person. Over the last 2 years, I've kind of had the benefit of attending several Web3 events. I've been to NFT NYC twice now. I'll be going back in April, and this time I'll actually be going as a speaker. So I'm pretty excited for that, being able to bring Web3 Warriors to the stage at NFT.NYC and really speak on the creator economy and speak on all of the innovations that we've been seeing both on the show and just in the wider community. So in attending a lot of these events, what I've seen is that the events are sometimes not that educational for those of us who have been in the space long term. Like, they seem to be great for those who are kind of entering the space and want to know kind of the basics or find kind of inspiring use cases and things like that. And that's great. That's part of what we try to do on this podcast as well. But to really kind of connect and collaborate with the grassroots of the community, we kind of need to do it ourselves. And so that's what we've been doing. So starting kind of last year in Brooklyn, we had a satellite event with NFT NYC where we had, shout out to Low Sleazy, who's been on the show. He actually, was dropping some bars and he performed an awesome live performance. We had some DJs, but importantly, we also had screens showing the Decentralized metaverse as well as the Voxels metaverse at the event. So this was an actual bar in Brooklyn, people hanging out, enjoying drinks and casual conversation, but also on the wall, there's people walking around in the metaverse, and in the metaverse, we're showing a screen that actually shows the IRL event. So those who are not there in New York could see what's happening at the event. You know, maybe they know some of the people there, they got friends there, so they're able to actually take part in the event remotely while enjoying themselves in the metaverse at the same time. And so this is the kind of integration and use case that we're going to be leaning into in 2024 for the metaverse. We did something similar in Miami just in last December. Been there for Art Basel now 2 years in a row, and we plan to continue to kind of show up there for the art community and to really just showcase again, you know, the potential of putting your art on the blockchain. It's not about making a bunch of sales overnight. It's not about becoming a millionaire. It's really just about taking something you're already doing, creating art, and providing that option of people buying that art on the blockchain. And what that will offer to you is the ability to, in the future, when you have, let's say, an event, you can actually go back and see, you know, everybody who's collected your NFTs, and you can airdrop a digital ticket to them. And you say, if you bought my NFT, you now have a ticket to the event taking place wherever it's taking place. So they have free access, right? And similarly, in the metaverse, you can have token gated access. So you can say only people who purchased your NFT can actually access this room or access this event in the metaverse. So that's what we're kind of expecting. That's what I look forward to seeing in the NFT space, in the Web3 space, much more quote unquote IRL or real world activations that integrate the metaverse and actually just end up offering a lot more accessibility to people who are, you know, remote and want to take part in the event. So we're going to be doing more of that. Keep an eye out for us at NFT NYC this April. We're going to have a satellite, at least one satellite event. We might have two actually. One's just going to be kind of a meet and greet idea. The other one that we're pulling together is the educational panels, but also an entertainment type of event at night like we did last year in Brooklyn. So shout out to MetaDre Productions, shout out to Andres, shout out to Biometa and VTA TV, who we always have showing on our Web3 Warriors site as well, where you can, you know, see what they're up to. They're streaming pretty much 24/7. Always got some cool, you know, IRL events that they're taking part in, integrating with Decentralized, integrating with voxels, and streaming it all on Twitch. So yeah, shout out to Biometa, shout out to everybody out here kind of pushing the space and pushing innovations in the metaverse. So that's what we're really excited for this year. More IRL events, more satellite events that integrate the metaverse. And lastly, we'll also be doing a little bit more gaming. So, you know, I'm rocking a GTA themed shirt here that I got in Miami. You know, we got the next GTA 6 is going to be coming out in 2025. It's actually going to be in Miami. And, you know, of course, there have been rumors that they might actually integrate a cryptocurrency. I don't think that's going to happen. They'll probably talk about crypto in the game, but I doubt that they will have a real on-chain cryptocurrency integrated into the game. But needless to say, there has to be a kind of blend of kind of the most cutting edge Web 2 quote unquote traditional video games and the on-chain community and the on-chain fun. So we're trying to kind of blend that. We're starting obviously with GTA 5 because GTA 6 isn't out yet, but we being Andres, MetaDre, and myself really just kind of enjoying GTA, enjoying gaming and live streaming and doing that, but also having Web3 conversations throughout. So, you know, we want to make it more of a casual experience, more of a regular gaming experience that just happens to include Web3 and NFT conversations and education. So that's another part of what we'll be doing in 2024, integrating the metaverse with gaming and with, again, real world events. So keep an eye out for that. We'll keep everybody posted on that. And for those of you who are already amongst our collectors, amongst those who have signed our guest book in the metaverse, there will be special perks for you as well. We're sending out all kinds of fun wearables. Shout out to Brooke, Sacred Clowns, helping me figure out how to be a good wearables builder and create my own wearables, and also donating some amazing ones. So, you know, it's because of community like that and because of creators and builders who are here for the love of the tech that we're able to keep kind of pushing things forward. So that's what we'll be doing in the metaverse. And then lastly, really want to look at this topic of tokenization, because I do think as NFTs become less kind of mysterious to people, and even worse, you know, seen as some kind of con or seen more in a negative kind of light and actually become commonplace, tokenization is going to be the reason for that, right? So we've seen this narrative again coming from BlackRock CEO Larry Fink on the heels of this approval of the Bitcoin ETF. And again, an ETF is basically just, I can't remember the exact acronym, what it stands for, but it's for an economic, basically you're tying stock to an asset, to a real world asset. So you have stocks tied to Bitcoin, the value of Bitcoin, but they're held and managed by a JP Morgan or a BlackRock exchange traded fund. Thank you, Grayson. I appreciate you. This is why we do the live stream. So the exchange traded fund is attached to the actual cost of Bitcoin, right? And these entities, whether it's a BlackRock, JP Morgan, ARK Invest, there's a few others out there, Grayscale, they all have big bags of Bitcoin essentially that they are then allowing their customers to invest in, and they're going to hold on to the Bitcoin for them, and their investors will be able to sell at any point when they decide that they've made enough money, and the entity will allow them to sell, give them their money, but of course take a small percentage. In the case of Grayscale, I believe it's about 1.5%. Some others are as low as 0.25 or 0.23%. I mentioned on the episode with Margaret that we actually have a ETF in Canada, and we've had it for a couple years, and our ETF's around the 1% or 1.4% that they take. So this is what they consider a management fee, but for this reason, and because the goal is to be on chain and not relying on the traditional banking entities, personally, if I'm going to invest in Bitcoin, I'm going to invest directly in Bitcoin. However, there are these scenarios where you might have money locked up in a pension or a retirement fund, and that money can't be taken out until you're 60 or 65 or whatever the case might be in your jurisdiction. So maybe you want to take money like that you couldn't otherwise invest in Bitcoin, real Bitcoin yourself, and invest it in an ETF and still be able to see some of the benefits of having invested in Bitcoin and, some of the gains. So I see the use case for it. I don't think it's all bad, but I also think that the way the mainstream is kind of framing this in the tokenization conversation, on one hand, it's good because that is the goal, and that's what we've been talking about here for 2 years now, the value of tokenization. But we're talking about the value of on-chain decentralized tokenization, the idea that you tokenize assets for the immutable future, both for accountability, for provenance, and also so that your collectors or your buyers in the future, if they want to sell that token, know that they can go to a market and actually sell it independently without having to receive approval or go through any middle people. So that's what it's really about now. Is that what the BlackRock CEO is talking about when he talks about tokenization? Not likely, but the value's the same, right? So whether you're buying luxury items and you want to see, the whole supply chain of how that luxury item got to your retailer, and you want to make sure, maybe it's not blood diamonds, you want to make sure it's not using slave labor, all these kind of things, tokenization can actually create a tokenized supply chain whereby from the seed or from the soil, from wherever that main product is being created, all the way through to the retail selling of that product, you can see all along the supply chain and verify that it is ethical, verify that it is sustainable, and that is the future, and it's not going to go anywhere. And I think that it's an interesting concept, a very important concept, and shout out to Shreya Bhan, who's actually going to be our next guest on the show, who is taking the tokenizing of fashion in a new direction and has some really amazing, beautiful fashion that she's working on that integrates NFTs and tokens and for sustainability reasons. So, tune in next week for that conversation. It's going to be really great. But with that, I do want to actually turn to the Larry Fink interview and get a sense of the industry and kind of where their mind's at. And then after this, I'll share a little bit of commentary, and then we'll probably wind down the episode here. And I want to thank everyone for sticking with me, and hopefully you've gained some insights and some thought-provoking concepts from this episode. So do share any questions or feedback that you have in the chat. All right, here we go.
We're going to be talking to Gary Gensler, the chair of the SEC, who made that decision reluctantly, maybe even begrudgingly, which was announced just 2 days ago, and we talked a lot about yesterday on the broadcast. How big a deal is that for BlackRock? And this was, for you, a big switch as well, because you were a naysayer for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I probably switched for the first 3 years of thinking about it, I was a naysayer, and about 2 years ago, I switched. And I'm actually, as I said in the last 2 years, I'm a big believer.
Are you a believer personally? Meaning, is the Fink family a Bitcoin buyer or a buyer of this new ETF?
Well, now I could do that. I cannot, I don't want to compete with our clients, so I don't buy single assets. I'll buy mutual funds. I'll buy single ETFs. So I have an opportunity to do that now. But I'm a believer in it because I do believe it is an alternative source for wealth holding. I don't believe it's ever going to be a currency. I believe it's an asset class.
You don't believe it ever becomes a currency?
No, I think we're going to create digital currencies. We're going to use the technology for it. We're going to use the blockchain.
How important is that, though, to then the long-term value proposition
of Bitcoin?
Of Bitcoin. If it's not something that ultimately becomes a currency, if it's simply, we'll call it digital gold, it's an asset of some sort, what does that mean?
It means,
in terms of price,
I believe it goes up if the world is more frightened, if people have fearful of geopolitical risk, they're fearful of their own risk. It's no different than what gold represented over thousands of years. It is a asset class that protects you.
Right.
And unlike gold, where we manufacture new gold, we're almost at the ceiling of the amount of Bitcoin that we created.
When you hear somebody like Cathie Wood,
yes,
who was on our broadcast yesterday, say
right, that
her base case is that this turns into a $600,000 a Bitcoin valuation, base case, and a million plus in a super optimistic case. Are you anywhere in her realm?
I haven't thought about it. To me, that what we are trying to do is offer an instrument that can store wealth. I think if it gets that even close to that high, gold will represent even a bigger value. And let's be clear, if you think it's digital gold, there's going to be a reference point between gold and Bitcoin. But let me get back to what happened yesterday. A part of our announcement that you mentioned in the opening, that we changed the architecture of our firm.
Right.
And much of it has to do with how we think about iShares and ETFs. When we bought BGI, very few people believed in that acquisition. And we were pretty mistreated for a couple of years, because we said active and passive can coexist. Obviously, we were right in that. Two, we said the fixed income market will be transformed through ETFs. That has now happened. Yesterday, we had the first day of Bitcoin ETFs. And our reorganization is taking that ethos of what has happened over the last 10 years. We believe ETFs is the technology that's going to transform every asset class. We believe everything will be done through ETFs. And so we believe this is just the beginning, and we needed to embed ETFs across the entire.
So what does that mean? If you're Rick Reeder, who we've had on the broadcast for years.
Rick is now doing more ETFs in his active space now. There's a great example of how we are taking what a very active investor and putting that into an ETF platform. Let me be clear. I think ETFs are step one in the technological revolution in the financial markets. Step two is going to be the tokenization of every financial asset. And to me, this is where we believe it's going. So we're looking at Bitcoin, we're looking at ETFs in the same manner. These are technological changes that can allow us to move forward.
What did you see yesterday, by the way, in terms of inflows as it relates to Bitcoin?
We were very happy with the flows. It appears that we received about 40% of the flows yesterday. I mean, one day doesn't make anything.
Are these new customers? Are these people who are coming out of other funds? I mean, Grayscale is the biggest player in this space right now. Are you trying to take share from them in terms of taking those clients over, or are you trying to create a new class of customer?
Primarily, we're trying to create an opportunity for new customers can invest in this financial instrument. Over the long run, do we believe, just think about the fee differential between an ETF and some of these trusts.
Right.
These trusts are like 120 basis points.
Very expensive. We were talking with the head of Grayscale yesterday. It's still an expensive product.
And these are 20 to 30 basis points in the ETF wrapper.
Well, it's expensive, by the way, for if you're a Grayscale customer to sell your shares.
Well, it's very expensive. Yes, and this is the big issue with the SEC, and this is something you may want to ask Gary. The industry asked to transfer in kind into an ETF, and that was denied by the SEC. That's a fine.
Meaning, let's just put a fine point on that. The industry, meaning companies like yours, asked the SEC to allow folks who might have owned shares via a Grayscale to be able to transfer those in kind to a Blackrock or to a Fidelity or whomever.
And so that there would be no tax ramifications. That was not denied. They wanted to really just create from scratch cash only, which we all respect the SEC's reasoning.
That creates an opportunity actually for Grayscale to keep those customers for a much longer time.
It does, but I think over the long run, when you start adding up the fees and adding up the fees, people are going to start thinking about redeeming and then ultimately going into an ETF.
Longer term, do you now expect other cryptocurrency ETFs? Meaning, do you think that Gary, and we'll talk to him later, Gary
like Ethereum
will have to approve an Ethereum ETF? And is that a function of something the SEC has